Hello and welcome back to SBE On-Demand Training. For those of you joining us for the very first time, my name is Michael Crane, and on behalf of the entire team, thank you for joining us. The purpose of these extremely short segments is to share business intelligence and general life wisdom to help you and I reach further towards our full potential. But here's the deal, they're very short, so let's go ahead and jump into today's session, and that is what a samurai can do for our success strategy. You see, when I first graduated high school, I went out and bought my first brand new car, and it was a Suzuki Samurai, and I thought it was the best vehicle ever made. And I took it anywhere and everywhere and showed it off to everyone, because why wouldn't someone want to see the best vehicle ever made? And all that was great until one day some friends of mine decided that we were all going to go to Colorado and go skiing for a week. They would be in their Volvo and me, of course, in my Suzuki Samurai. And everything was great as we crossed through the very flat plains of Texas, through the tip of Oklahoma into Colorado, but then we got to the Rocky Mountains, and that's when I realized the not so subtle difference between a Volvo and a Suzuki Samurai. The Volvo had no problem making it up each mountain, but as for me and my Suzuki Samurai, we struggled. In fact, several times I would continually have to downshift it to make sure it had enough RPMs to give us any sort of momentum. But even so, I think at one point we were moving so slow that a hitchhiker with a backpack probably passed us. And it was then, of course, I realized the not so subtle difference, and my Suzuki Samurai had a lot more room to improve. The same can be true in business. You see, when the economy is flowing and it feels like, man, we're just moving along like on flatland, and it just seems like there's money everywhere, it's robust economy and everything's great, and then we can fall into a false sense of security that we're better than we really are. Now, we may be good, but there's more room to improve than what we sometimes realize, especially as it relates to business strategy. And that's what I want to talk about today, smart and relevant business strategy. Now, I find that there are two types of strategies that are typically out there, the very complex and the non-existent. The complex is when we have 50 to 150, 200 pages written out, and maybe it's needed to secure government contracts or to get funding, but for most people, 6 months after they've completed a complex business strategy, they don't even know where it's at because it's irrelevant in day-to-day operations. And then we have on the opposite end, that's non-existent, where people don't have any strategy whatsoever. They have good intent and they work extremely hard, but there's no strategy behind them. In fact, only 3% of the population actually create a strategy for success. But here's the really good news, that 3% earn 10 times the income, and that should motivate us all to make sure that we have a relevant and smart business success strategy in place. So that's what I'd like to talk about today. Okay, we go to page 1. At the very top, we see it. It says SBE Smart Strategy. And of course, it's broken down into 5 parts. S-M-A-R-T, to make it easy to remember. The S stands for soul. Before we get into where we want to go and what measurements we want to use, we first need to get clarity on who we are and what we represent. So this has 6 components. So we go to the first one, S1, what you do. In 9 words or less, we should be able to effectively and efficiently describe what we do. Then we move over to S2, why do we do it? The core motivation. And this is more than just providing good service and collecting revenue. It's about why are we in the particular industry that we do business in. S3, who do we do it for? Real quick, this is just a description of our ideal client. Then we transition to S4. Your top 5 core beliefs or values are the top 5 core behaviors. So here we simply list the top 5 core beliefs and a descriptor to each one of those beliefs and make sure that we're never in violation. S5, your public promise. It's our slogan. This is easiest. Of the first 6 questions, this one's the easiest. Then we move over to S6, and it's a description of our desired internal culture. So that makes up the soul. What we do, why we do it, who we do it for, our top 5 core beliefs, our public promise, and a description of our internal culture. Now let's move to M, measurement. So we begin with M1, your top 5 KPIs, the top key performance indicators. These are the 5 numbers that we watch that allow us to know exactly where we stand as it relates to status. We also want to make sure that we know where we currently stand and of course our goals, so we know what we're contrasting to. To the right, you simply have an example. If you don't already have one of these already, many companies will have a dashboard in which they can go and take a look at and know exactly where they stand. All right, so now let's move over to the second page, continuing with measurement, and go to M2. M2, Perceived Achievement Grid. In a few moments, we're going to get into goal settings. We're going to talk about the key objectives we wish to accomplish in the future. But before we do that, it's very healthy for us to go back and reflect on where we've come from and where we currently find ourselves at. So starting at the dot at the far left, we just simply, through our own perception, create a path, a line graph, if you will, as to how we've done over time as it relates to our level of achievements. For many of our clients, it typically looks something like this. We started out with a little bit of a ramp-up time, but then all of a sudden, we catch our stride and we feel ourselves climbing in our level of achievement to the point that we didn't think that we would ever be stopped. But then all of a sudden, just like in my Suzuki Samurai, the terrain changed and all of a sudden we found ourselves staring at competition or an economy that we never expected. And then we begin to make a decline, doing all that we can to hang on. And for many, they've come to a realization that the bleeding has stopped, they've been able to make it, but now they realize it's time to close the gap and to regain the momentum that they had once experienced. So with that in mind, we now move to M3 and talk about clarifying questions. Now, a word of caution, these questions are not easy to answer, but once you do, it can truly unleash a greater level of achievement. Number one, what are the brutal facts in regard to the reasons you have not met all your expectations? Number two, in somewhat the same light, what are the questions you're pretending not to know? All too often, we know that there are specific answers as it relates to why we're underachieving, but we don't like dealing with those answers, so we pretend the question doesn't exist. And what we truly need to do, if we're truly committed to reaching our full potential in the quickest amount of time, we have to get extremely honest with those questions. Number three, who needs on the bus? Who needs off the bus, and who might just need a different seat? Okay, so now that we've established the 5 KPIs that will allow us to measure real-time status, and we took time to reflect on where we've come from and where we're currently at, and the clarifying questions, let's now move forward into the future. And so what we want to do is establish the key objectives for the future, and we want to begin with the end in mind. So M4, top 1 and 3. What we want to do is look into the future. 3 years from now, what is the one top goal or objective we want to accomplish? Now, I know that we'll have more than one, but we're going to list the very top one here. And to the right, we want to make sure that we've established in advance the source of measurement. How are we going to measure real-time status and know that we've achieved that goal? Then we follow that same trend and we go to M5, top 3 and 12. What are the top 3 goals, the top 3 objectives we're going to accomplish in the next year? And M6, top 4 and 3. Our top 4 goals to accomplish in the next 3 months, the next quarter. And again, we want to make sure that we have a source of measurement. Okay, so that we've gone through the S and the M, the soul and the measurement. Now we get to the A of SMART success strategy, and that stands for action items, the task that we must complete in order to truly create the momentum we seek. So we go to A1, top 5 and 5. Your top 5 action items are tasks to complete within the next week, the next 5 days. Many of our clients have asked that we incorporate some type of activity or time management piece to it, so we've incorporated the ABC principle. DOC stands for the date in which you want it completed. Of course, we can check it off, and we also want to make sure that we've established a lead, someone who's going to get credit, but also someone who's going to be solely responsible for making sure that task is completed. Now, it may be you, but maybe it's somebody else's responsibility. But we want to make sure that we've listed a person here. Now, here's a key point. Any more than one person listed as a lead is one too many. Other people may be involved and needed, but we want to make sure that only one person is responsible for making sure it gets done. A2 is the top 10 and 30. Your top 10 action items are tasks to complete within the next 30 days, the next month. And then A3, it's the same principle, but now it's the top 12 and 12. Your top 12 action items are tasks to complete within the next year. Now at the bottom, you'll see that we've got a linear graph through 12 months. All too often, we tend to get a little overzealous when we begin to complete a strategy. And we get overzealous in regard to how much we actually think we're going to get done over the next 12 months. So we want to be careful and intelligently make sure that we map out how many weeks it's going to take to complete each task. Okay, we've gone through the S, the M, the A, now we get to the R in SMART, and that is for risk. And we're also going to incorporate threats. R1, we simply list the top 3 risks that we must take. What's the comfort zones that we have to go on the outside of? R2, the top 3 threats. Who or what threatens our progress? Okay, we've completed the S, the M, the A, the R, and now we're to the final component, the T, and that is for trophies. How you and or your team will celebrate key achievements. So in T1, we list the top 3 critical milestones we want to celebrate, and T2 is simply how we're going to do it. Is it going to be a luncheon, a dinner, or a cruise to the Caribbean? It's all dependent on the milestone we're celebrating and the budget that we have for it. But it's important that we establish some type of mode of celebration for those critical milestones that are important for our success. I have no doubt that once you complete your SMART strategy, you too will be able to create even greater levels of success. You'll be more effective and more efficient than ever before. If you don't already have your template already in hand, be sure to reach out to us and we'll get it to you today.